Welcome back to Griffith Realty's podcast. Our podcast is called Land and Legacy, and I'm Scott Griffith, president of Griffith Realty, and my sister Kira, who's usually the co-host here with me, is unavailable today, so it's just me, but I am blessed to have a very special guest, a world-renowned economist and coincidentally a friend, Lawrence Young, the National Association of Realtors chief economist and senior vice president of research. Lawrence has been the economist for many years now for the National Association of Realtors. We have nearly 1.4 million members, and he's the economist that helps guide us as to what's going to happen with the economy as he sees it into the future. Thanks to his work and his division of the National Association, they're responsible for everything from the home sales statistics, the affordability index, the home buyers and sellers report. I can remember back a number of years ago, about the time Lawrence had just become the national economist, when he started the pending sales report that's to now a national standard for activity that's expected in the real estate industry. So welcome, Lawrence. We're so pleased to have you as part of our podcast. New for us, but we're getting used to it.
Thank you for inviting Scott. And of course, we have known each other for many years because in your capacity, National Association of Realtors is a member-driven association. You served as the research committee to guide us on what reports would be important. Furthermore, you were the regional vice president, which means representing Michigan and Ohio. I'm not sure if two states are rivalry or not, but at least you cover the two regions representing the realtors in the region for the national issues. So great to join you.
Well, thank you. And as you pointed out, we couldn't agree on sports, but we could agree on everything in real estate. So we did okay with Ohio and Michigan. I really appreciate your being here in a time that's very unique in the economy. I know that I suppose it's always unique, but we are have experienced a period where we couldn't talk about anything but a recession and then jobs to, in a very short period, nobody remembers the job discussion. They all want to talk about the CPI and cost of living because all of a sudden inflation seems to be driving our world and it dominates us. How have you seen it interpreted into the housing market as it relates? I think since housing's part of that statistic, that's one of the reasons it's so high because we know how hot real estate's been. But what are some of the other things, your thoughts about the inflation rate as this relates to our real estate industry?
When we had the lockdown and 20 million jobs disappear, restaurant jobs, hotels during the lockdown, it was quite scary. And consequently, the Federal Reserve went all in, that is to say, lowest possible interest rate environment. And the consumers saw under 3% mortgage rates, took advantage of it, and hence the real estate market really took off. And furthermore, this new flexible work from home situation for many office workers. Now, I have to applaud all those people who have to go out onto the street every day, nurses, the firefighters, the truck drivers. But for office workers, they were lucky enough to work from home during COVID days. And consequently, people say, look, I don't want to work on my kitchen table. I need a larger space. So that actually raised the real estate demand as well. So combination of low interest rate and work from home for office workers boosted the real estate demand, still hot at the moment.
Yeah, anecdotally, we still see a tremendous demand. The problem is the lack of inventory because as we've gone through both a period of holidays and winter, and a number of people sold. The trick is, can you find a property? Can you get a property on the market? And then how do you balance that demand that's so high still even for it? And to the effect that interest rates have been low, and as you just said, the Fed's been all in, and now the Fed's decided it's time to start to tighten monetary policy, and we're going to see them start to do rate increases and rate hikes, and we've seen the 10-year Treasury bills just start to shoot up because of the anticipation of that, which is going to interpret into higher interest rates. I believe the national average for an interest rate has already hit 4%, as of this week, but I assume it's a spike. What is your observations about the interest rates?
Oh, you are absolutely right that inflation is very irritating. It's eating into people's pocketbook. But what it also means is that Federal Reserve, their task is to contain inflation, or at least one of their mandate. And with inflation out of control, it looks like Federal Reserve is not doing its job, and they want to now try to catch up by raising interest rate, which means that mortgage rates are rising. 10-year treasury, I mean, most realtors are unfamiliar with the impact, but Scott, you have been in the industry and you know exactly what to look for. 10-year treasury yields are at above 2%, or at what's above 2% just yesterday, which means that one adds another percentage and a half to that. So mortgage rate currently should be about 3.7%, but I'm reading actually 4%. So there is actual additional margin being tacked on in the current mortgage market. But the higher rate will surely cut back on some demand eventually. I say eventually because when the rates rise, usually there's extra rush of buyers going into the market. People who are sitting on the fence looking for the right inventory, but now they say, oh, this may be my last chance. I better make the decision now. So there's extra push of demand. But eventually you have smaller pool of buyers who can qualify for mortgage at higher interest rate, and that will steadily reduce the demand over time.
So my thought process, and you're the economist, so you'll know better, but since we have been experiencing a market where it has been competitive offers well over the asking price, it would seem to me that if the interest rates go up, people cannot get as large a mortgage, but it may not adjust the market. It may just adjust the price on which people sell for closer to what the market reflects as the appraised value, as I call it, what the bank can justify, not what the buyers can justify. I think at the end of the day, we just may go back to having people making offers closer to the asking price versus way over the asking price. That's philosophically what could happen initially. I guess if it stayed high for a long period of time, we might start to see some sort of impact on pricing, but I don't see that happening for a long time.
When mortgage rate rise, just from the fact that purchasing power is reduced, so people simply cannot make too much above list price, and hence that the market pricing, I think will normalize rather than that intense multiple offers. Still, if there are many buyers out there, especially cash buyers who don't need to take out a mortgage, and there's more institutional investors now coming into the market. They see a strong rent growth across the board, apartments, single family rentals. So they also want to get into the market, but they are immune from mortgages because it's pretty much all cash deals. So we'll see how that goes. But overall, I would say that for consumers, the days of 15% price increase in a single year, which has occurred in many parts of the country, those days are over. I think people should anticipate more 3%, 5% annual price appreciation from this point onward, given that the mortgage rate is now returning, is moving upwards, but let's also consider it's returning back to normal in a sense after
Right.
the exceptionally low interest rate environment.
And I'm afraid that I have millennials who have known only this interest rate. And when it gets to what I consider a normal range of maybe 6%, they're going to call it double, twice what it used to be and they're going to be in shock. But I'm afraid that's probably where they're going to have to get used to at some point in their life. I can't get over that we're where we are in prices, but that's in interest rate. It's nuts, but it's great.
Consumers adjust to many, many things. And if we remember, last time we had this high consumer price inflation, 7.5% inflation, that's 40 years ago. So
Wow.
millennials, anyone who's under the age of 40, they have never seen anything like it. But also the Fed was very aggressive when they saw that and raised the interest rate at one point going up to 18%. I remember in 1982.
I
That
remember.
really killed off the home sales market. Buyers dried up. But miraculously, home prices did not decline because the rents were rising. When there is an inflation, rents are rising. So rising rents provide support for home values.
Isn't that fascinating? And you we haven't talked about it, but I know you track it closely. The boomers are now hitting the market. The millennials, as they're called, they are finally in the market, and there's such a huge population. And we know they all can work because there's plenty of jobs out there. And so all of a sudden you have all this demand for housing stock, which hasn't kept up. You've talked about this for years now. You've predicted it for years, how we're falling short of the housing stock by home builders. So it's a dynamic of supply may not be there, and therefore prices have to go someplace if there's all that demand, it would seem.
It's encouraging to see that builders are now finally putting up 1.6 million homes per year, or at least that was the latest data that came out. And that's comforting because, historical average is right around that figure. We had been under that number for 15 straight years. And the cumulative impact of underproduction is inventory shortage across the board, whether affordable housing, mid-price housing, upper end market, just shortage across the board, across all geography, all regions, West Coast, East Coast, Midwest. But I think one thing that is helping Michigan is that affordability, relatively speaking. I know prices have spiked up in Michigan markets, but at median price of under 300,000, I mean, these are still very affordable by other cities across the country, and hence Michigan has one of the highest home ownership rate, over 70%, while nationally it's only about 64%.
And that is a blessing of the Michigan. It goes clear back to the auto factory days and the factory people who got jobs and could be middle Americans and own houses. The other thing that's fascinating about Michigan that usually doesn't get too much conversation is I believe we're the second largest state of second home ownership, which is after Florida, which is fascinating. But we have so many lakes and shoreline and so much. And to my concern, I've been reading about recently that Fannie Mae has decided to add some additional cost. I won't get into the details, but they're raising some cost to second home mortgages, which is probably going to have some impact in Michigan too on our second house or vacation homes, because of raise costs.
So anytime costs of something goes up, it's going to reduce the demand. But whoever came up with the television commercial on Michigan, I forgot the phrase they used, but that's a fantastic commercial. It opens the eye about the fresh water availability, surrounded by the Great Lakes. And going back to work from home situation, which is developing. Now, for most companies, it's going to be some kind of hybrid. That's my guess. Come to work 2 days a week, something like this.
Yeah.
But we also have heard major companies, like technology companies, even Price Waterhouse, major accountancy companies, essentially saying work from anywhere. So if that's the case, I mean, people will say, I want to have a vacation home in Michigan. That's where I want to work. And then after working, ride some bikes along the lake shore. So, so even though the cost of mortgages may be rising, I think there's a desire for that second home market from some companies essentially providing work from anywhere.
Yeah, we're masterful because you don't want to see on a day like currently. This is a February day in Michigan where we're about to get 8 inches of snow. Somehow that's not going to make our ads. Just let me tell you that. They're going to show you when the lakes are not with ice on them. I think we're kind of blessed in Michigan that way also. But I just think it's going to be probably a very good year in real estate still. Everything indicates that the demand's still there and it hasn't changed. I just got off the phone today with a realtor in Arizona, and you'd think she was sitting in my backyard talking about demand, talking about how activity is so on and so forth. And as you see from a national scope, everywhere is the same as we are. Everybody's got the same issues, everybody's got the same activity and got the same demand. Do you think the spring is going to be a strong spring because of all these dynamics we just talked about in the short run, or do you think it'll be about the same as last year?
So spring would be interesting. Again, rising interest rate means that in the early months of that, there is a rush of buyers who want to close the deal. I think by autumn and winter, one will begin to see lower sales compared to 12 months before. So one does a year-over-year comparison. I also see more inventory showing up. Inventory showing up because builders want to build more. I know they are facing some supply chain issues on, lumber prices being expensive or that garage door never arriving from a container ship. So there are some issues related to it, but there is a desire to build. There's a profit incentive to build. So we should be getting more supply. Something that I feel a little uncomfortable discussing on housing supply, but it's the reality of it, which is that COVID has really wreaked havoc on the death situation in America. One looks at prior to COVID, roughly 2.5 or 3 million Americans passed away from a variety of issues, old age, heart attack. But then it made a sharp upward turn since the arrival of COVID. And we know that it's the elderly who have been succumbing to the COVID. So people need help in terms of housing adjustment. Maybe a widow does not need that large size home anymore, and they need to sell that. Or maybe it's an estate sale, but he has to go through that process before reaching the market. Just trying to explain the reality of this terrible COVID impact on the U.S.
I hadn't even thought about that. I'm sure that is awful. We have experienced that even in our own backyard. We have many people who have, as you say, had illnesses that somebody succumbed to, and it also has taken folks who, I'm in my 60s, my age and older, to start to say, we need to look at what our future housing is going to be right now, not in the future. I mean, there's this tendency to think of yourself way younger than you are until you start to realize some realities about the end of life and start to realize you can't be forever in the same big house you used to be in, and you need a ranch and all those good things. So it's fascinating. It's truly an interesting time in real estate, isn't it? Lawrence, it's just fascinating.
Oh, yeah, yes. So, we have the rising rates. I guess one good thing, one consistent consensus among economists is that job growth will continue. So, we do have this higher mortgage rate, but at least more people will have jobs, especially with the, hopefully crossing my fingers, COVID gets out of the way by year end and we get back to normal. I know that many restaurants are getting a little busier now than before. Some of the office workers in the big cities like Chicago or New York are still not even back to half the level. But steadily we are trying to get back to normal, and I think this job creation will also boost or at least provide support for housing demand.
Yep, I do too. It's wonderful. And so I don't want to take too much time. I know you're a busy person and you got lots of people to talk to. I really appreciative of our friendship and the fact that you're willing to do this today. And thank you so much. Lawrence, keep up the good work there. I know you're in Washington, D.C., so stay out of the way of all the politicians and have a good day, and we appreciate your being on our podcast. So thank you very much.
Well, talking about the real estate being could be one bipartisan issue. I'm not sure if this podcast is part video or just a voice recording, but the building right behind me is a glass building, which is the home for NBC studio in D.C. So MSNBC is there. Also, Fox News is in that building. So if one wants to stand in the doorway, one will find interesting people going in and out on the same building.
Well, that's a smart landlord. He knows that. He's got a rising tide on one or the other all the time. I love it. Well, again, thanks so much, Lawrence. Have a great day.
Right,
we really appreciate it. Have a good one.
Great talking to you.
Bye now.
Bye.
Thank you very much for listening to our Land and Legacy, and hope that we'll hear from you in the future. This is Scott Griffith. Bye now.